Hi guys, good to have you here. A video here that I'll be reacting to Jordan Peterson on genderism and free speech. Guys, let's take a look.
Look, it's important that people are able to use their own words.
Okay.
Because that's how we think.
Do you think a trans woman is a woman?
No,
Why not?
because I think that women are capable, generally speaking, of having babies, and they have female genitalia, and they have an XX chromosome, and I think the biological markers are relevant. It doesn't necessarily mean that I don't think that people should be treated with respect and dignity if they happen not to fit easily into a gender category. That's a different issue.
Right.
But it's a matter of definition, and I actually think it's a foolish argument in some sense, because what do you mean by real?
Well, I mean, you've just clarified that, though. You don't think that a trans woman is a woman. And do you think that that is what is behind or explains your opposition to this idea of a law mandating you to use a preferred pronoun, is because you don't actually believe that that's the truth, that a trans woman is a woman, and therefore you can't use that pronoun?
No, that's not my argument at all.
Really?
Yeah, really. My argument is that the government shouldn't compel voluntary speech.
No, but I know what your argument is, and
No,
you've
but
made it
that's
very
really
clearly.
it. No, but that's exactly it. There's
But the
no
motivation
there's
behind
no motivation behind it.
But you don't believe
I wouldn't
a trans
put
woman is a woman.
everything on my online in my life to take the stance I did unless I had thought that through very deeply. And I've thought it through very deeply. There aren't hidden motivations that have to do with some arbitrary prejudice against trans people.
Okay.
It's pure and simply this. There's never been a time in English common law history where the government compelled speech, and the Canadian government dared to do that. And that was unacceptable. And they masked it with this show of compassion for the oppressed, and I don't buy it.
Those are the sorts of problems that trans people face every day, being out of housing, being considered, considering suicide. These are really big problems.
My refusal to use pronouns because left-wing activists want me to use them has nothing to do with whether or not trans people are having difficulties in society. And I'd also like to point out that I've had many letters of support.
Problem, isn't it?
I've had many letters of support from trans people, and they tell me that the trans activists don't support them, and most trans people
Jordan,
actually wanted to be referred to as he or she.
Doesn't mean
they
that
weren't
you
my
are
friends.
Untransphobic.
They
just
weren't
because
my
you
friends.
know a few people, just because you've talked to a few trans people, you don't know the trans community like the trans community does. You've got no idea what it's like to be trans.
Professor Pete, Professor Pete, I'm sorry to interrupt. Let's let Professor Peterson finish his thought, please.
All right. So, the trans activists aren't proper representatives of the trans community because they haven't been elected by the trans community.
Nobody elected you either, Jordan.
I'm not speaking for anyone except myself, and on behalf of other people, perhaps who want to maintain the right to free speech. I'm not claiming that I'm a representative of white people or white men or any other group. I'm speaking on behalf of myself, and so I'm not taking.
But Professor Peterson, let me jump in there, though, because we have seen an evolution of language. There are words that we don't use anymore.
Not by legislation.
Well, legislation or not, there are words that have evolved. We don't use, for example, I'm Asian. I would bristle if someone called me Oriental. That is an evolution of how we use words. How is this different, whether legislated or not?
I understand
I understand legislatively, but if at the heart of it is to allow a student to study free of what they feel is discrimination, why not help that along?
I already made my case for why not help that along. I believe that this legislation is extraordinarily dangerous, and there's other elements of it too that we haven't even got to in our society yet, like the protection for gender expression. And I've looked at gender expression in the Ontario Human Rights Code, and as far as I can tell, gender expression is best summarized in a single word: fashion.
Can someone please explain to Jordan B. Peterson that there's a difference between freedom of speech and freedom from consequence? Do you agree there's a difference?
Well, certainly there's a difference.
And are you prepared to suffer the consequences that society may deem you need to suffer because of your views?
Yes, I'm prepared to do that.
What does that entail?
Are you open to learning?
Well, hang on.
That's not the question.
Hang on, that wasn't the question.
It's
That's
true.
right.
Well, so what am I willing to do? Well, I think that the Ontario Human Rights Tribunal is probably obligated by their own tangled web to bring me in front of it. If they find me, I won't pay it. If they put me in jail, I'll go on a hunger strike. I'm not doing this. And that's that. I'm not using the words that other people require me to use, especially if they're made up by radical left-wing ideologues. Now, if our society comes to some sort of consensus over the next while about how we'll solve the pronoun problem, let's call it, and that becomes part of popular parlance, and it seems to solve the problem properly without sacrificing the distinction between singular and plural, and without requiring me to memorize an impossible list of an indefinite number of pronouns, then I would be willing to reconsider my position. But I'm also partly opposed to this because it's been made mandatory and has the whole weight of the law behind it. It's like, this is a very bad idea. I believe this is a very bad idea. And I believe that the reason this has caused so much noise, tremendous amount of noise, tremendous amount of attention on YouTube, is because there are things that are at stake in this discussion, despite its surface nature, that strike at the very heart of our civilization.
Do you think that your behavior risks politicizing it, and do you think that politicization is justified?
I think my behavior risks politicizing it, yes. I would rather it not be politicized, and I'm doing what I can to manage that risk. However, it's become political in my country because the government implemented compelled speech legislation. So I wasn't complaining about that before it became political. Now, and there is a time, even when you're detached in some sense from the political realm, that you can't be detached anymore. Well, I'm not happy with the fact that this has become politicized. You could say that I haven't done a stellar job in ensuring in every possible manner that this has remained neutrally apolitical. Probably true, but I'm not particularly unhappy with the way things have gone so far. And I'm not happy with the radical left. And so if they're irritated at me, so much the better, as far as I'm concerned. So have I conducted myself perfectly? It's like, undoubtedly no. So I've got more than my fair share of faults, and a temper is one of them. But I'm muddling through. And I've spoken with no shortage of trans people, and my proclivity has been, without exception so far, to address them in the manner that seems most socially appropriate under the circumstances. Now, you asked a specific question, which was, do I have special expertise that I might share with other people?
You're doing Martin Luther, and I think that these issues are a little subtler than those. And so,
well, what makes you think that you're doing the kids that are grandstanding any favors by going along with their manipulation?
Because I can't decide which ones those are. Well, I just have my gut instincts, and that's not good enough.
Look, fair enough, but you have a type 1 and type 2 error problem. So one error is that you don't call students what they deserve to be called. That's one error. And the other error is that you call students what they want to be called even though they don't deserve it. And so what you're trying to do optimally is to minimize both those errors. And to do that, you have to take a middle route. Now, what you've decided to do, and I'm not criticizing it, is you've decided to allow for the possibility 100% of one of those errors because you think it's a less significant error. And, you might be right. But it's not like you're acting in an error-free manner. You've just decided to minimize one form of error at the expense of the other. Because I would say you're allowing what would you call it, attention-seeking and somewhat narcissistic undergraduates to gain the upper hand over you in your class.
Whoa.
Talk about common ground, it's got to be founded on some kind of truth. And when we have feminists saying, I don't believe in the biological differences between men and women, well, that's why it's controversial. Where do you go from there? That's why it's controversial to say what you're saying, and it's controversial to say, hold on a second, maybe a girl on testosterone therapy winning high school wrestling meets is a problem. That's controversial.
Maybe that's a bad idea. It's just possible that that's not a very good idea. It's hard to imagine that could be the case. But, in this idea that I don't believe in the biological differences between men and women, it's like, well, what do you mean by believe? Exactly. It's like you act out your belief. What the hell does that mean? And what do you mean? See, what do you mean by belief? What do you mean by biology? And what do you mean by gender? Like, as soon as you put those three concepts together in a sentence that says, I don't believe in the biological difference between the genders, you throw the meaning of all three of those words up into the air so far that no one can tell what you're talking about, including you.
Yeah. And that's the goal, though, I think, a lot of the time. I think it's...
Oh, definitely. The goal, part of the goal is an all-out assault on the categorical structure.
a trans person in your class has come to your class and said they want to be called
That's never
she.
happened. And I would call them she.
So you would. So you've kind of changed your tune on that.
No, I said that right from the beginning. What I said at the beginning was that I was not going to cede the linguistic territory to radical leftists, regardless of whether or not it was put in law. That's what I said. And then the people who came after me said, oh, you must be transphobic and you'd mistreat a student in your class. It's like, I never mistreated a student in my class. I'm not transphobic, and that isn't what I said.
Well, except you've also called trans campaigners authoritarian, haven't you? I mean, isn't that grossly...
Well, only in the broader context of my claims that radical leftist ideologues are authoritarian,
Yes,
which
but
they are.
You're saying someone who's trying to work out their gender identity, who may well have struggled with that, had quite a
No
tough
doubt
time
have
over the
struggled
years.
with it, yeah.
You're comparing them with, you know, Chairman Mao, who
just the
saw the
activists.
deaths of millions of people. Well,
Just the
even if the
activists.
activists, you know, they're trans people too. They have a right to say these things.
Yeah, but they don't have
Isn't
a
it
right to
grossly
speak for their whole
insensitive
community.
to compare them to Chairman Mao?
Thank you.
You know, Pinochet, Augusto Pinochet. I mean, you know, this is grossly insensitive.
I didn't compare them to Pinochet.
Well,
I did compare
he's
them
an
to
he
Mao.
was an authoritarian.
He's a
wasn't he?
right-winger, though. I was comparing them to the left-wing totalitarians. And
Okay,
I do believe they are left-wing totalitarians.
Under Mao, millions of people died.
Right.
I mean, there's no comparison between Mao and a trans activist, is there?
Why not?
Because trans activists aren't killing millions of people?
The philosophy that's guiding their utterances is the same philosophy.
The consequences
Not
are...
yet.
You're saying that trans activists could lead to the deaths of millions of people? What
No,
they're
I'm
doing-
saying that the philosophy that drives their utterances is the same philosophy that already has driven us to the deaths of millions of people.
Okay, tell us how that philosophy is in any way comparable.
Sure, that's no problem. The first thing is that the philosophy presumes that group identity is paramount. That's the fundamental philosophy that drove the Soviet Union and Maoist China. And it's the fundamental philosophy of the left-wing activists. It's identity politics. It doesn't matter who you are as an individual. It matters who you are in terms of your group identity.
Too much. Oh my God. God, what a man. Like, what a man. A straight talker, value-rooted, deep-rooted. If everybody in the world is going by the right, Mr. Peterson is not even scared to stand by the left and stand by what he believes. Like, he would defend himself without mimicking a word. Like, what a man. The only thing I can say is, God, please bless, keep, protect Mr. Peterson. Like, we need more people like him. People that are not scared to say the truth. They will come out and stand by the truth, not minding if the whole world is saying why. Person is not scared to say that this is black. I stand by the truth and I'm not scared. Guys, hope you enjoyed this video as much as I did. On the next one, be at peace with yourself. Watch, like, and subscribe. Bye bye.